What's up, my fellow communication nerds? It's Joanna back again, and today I'm going to answer 3 questions. What is internal communication? What is employee engagement? And are they the same, different? What's the difference between the two? Let's get stuck in. I am a lecturer in strategic internal communication, and these are questions I love to ask my students. And they seem deceptively simple. What is internal communication? What is employee engagement? But they're actually quite hard, particularly when you start trying to navigate where is the boundary between the two? How do they overlap? How are they different? And what's super interesting is there are so many different definitions for internal communication, even within our profession. Every academic, every practitioner, everybody seems to have their own understanding of what it is. And this matters because surely we need to have a shared understanding of what our profession is all about, what we're trying to achieve. So let's try and get a little bit on the same page over the course of this video. Now, if this content is your bag, why don't you stop what you're doing right now and hit that subscribe button underneath, hit that like button. The more you do that, the more my videos will get pushed out, and we can help to make everybody a better communicator at work and really help the internal communication professionals who need this content. Okay, so when I ask my students, sit in groups and come up with definitions for internal communication and employee engagement, they kind of look at me like, well, this is easy. And then they start to do it, and they find that actually they don't always agree with each other, and they have quite heated debates. Sometimes they even have arguments over it, which is super, super interesting. Employee engagement is one of those terms that I don't think anybody really agrees on what it is. So that gets really, really muddy, really cloudy, really quickly in these conversations. And if you work in internal communications, you may have employee engagement in your job title. Maybe your job is internal communications and employee engagement manager. So it's really important that you understand what these concepts mean. Then you can have really clear contracting conversations with your boss, with your leadership team, about very specifically what you're there to deliver, what you're there to do, and what value you bring to the organization. So let's start with understanding internal communication. What the hell is it? So every organization in the world communicates internally. It's the communication between employees, between leaders, up and down and front to back. Every organization does it. Whether they do it well or not is another question. I like to think of internal communication as like the oil in the engine of a car. It helps everything run smoothly, it reduces friction, it speeds everything up. I mean, you could probably run a car without it for a while, but I don't think you'd want to. And after a while, your car is going to break down and get really damaged. That's what's going to happen in your organization. If you have really ineffective, weak internal communication, it will have massive impact on your business and how your organization runs. And increasingly, organizations are becoming aware that internal communication is more than a support function or a service function that can produce pretty outputs like slide decks or nice branded posters, but actually it's a function that can support huge outcomes from the business in terms of reducing staff turnover, increased employee engagement, we'll get to that later, higher revenue, higher profits. There are huge benefits in investing in internal communication for the smart companies that understand what it is. So we know that internal communication is super important. Let's just get a little bit more specific about what it is. Is internal communication essentially an internal postal service where you're just disseminating information? No. It's not. It's a lot more than that. If that's all it was, you wouldn't need professional internal communicators. You could probably outsource that to AI or to a robot. Now, our job does involve the dissemination of information, but it just goes further than that, because an internal postal service suggests just pushing stuff at people. You're just delivering messages. Here you go. Good luck to you. And internal communication is not simply a broadcast one-way system of sending out messages. Rather, it's a broader approach about creating shared understanding in an organization, so people feel like they understand things and they know what's going on. And there's a lovely line in Bill Quirk's book. I'll leave a link to it below if you're interested in reading it. I'm going to read out this quote from his book. The role of internal communication is to provide employees with the information they need to do their job and to paint the bigger picture and tell the fuller story that puts that information into context. Now, I like this because it's helping employees to do their job, but it's connecting them with the bigger picture of what's this all about. If we think about internal communication as being more than an internal postal service where we're just disseminating messages, it's better to understand it as a system that can significantly influence employees' behaviours, knowledge and attitudes. Because when you have an effective system of internal communication, we as internal communicators leaders are very influential in our organization. We can absolutely influence and change how employees feel about their workplace, how they feel about different transformations and change, what they do, how they make their decisions, how they spend their time. It's very significant. And I would say the most powerful effect of internal communication is that ability to influence what employees do. Effective communication can systematically drive the desired behaviours that you want in your organisation. So maybe you want people to adhere to certain safety measures. Maybe you need people to comply with particular regulations. You need effective communication in order to drive those behaviours. And this is critically important to what we do. This is where our value really lies. And communication also drives huge influences and changes in how employees feel. How do they feel about their job? How do they feel about their workplace? How do they feel about their colleagues? How do they feel about the leaders? Communication can really inspire and motivate employees, can help them feel part of a team, help them feel part of a bigger thing, help them feel all connected to each other under a shared purpose. And poor communication can go the other direction. It can make people feel a lot of distrust. It can make people feel really demotivated and uninspired. So if you're watching this and you work in internal communication, please never underestimate the value and the power of your impact in that organisation. The work you do really matters and has massive, massive impact on every employee in the business. I think the key word that I would use when I talk about the real purpose and the value of internal communication is the word alignment. And Bill Quirk talks about this a lot in his book. He calls it shared understanding. So if you work in an organisation that is not aligned around a common purpose, a common strategy, some set of common values, it will manifest as particular things that you can see. You might see that teams won't collaborate with each other. You might see that there's a very high conflict workplace. You might see that the leadership team are communicating mixed messages, or maybe the organisation is really siloed and people are competing for resources rather than collaborating with each other. And something that I often see is that the day-to-day work that people are doing really has no alignment or links to the bigger goals of the organisation and the mission of the organisation and what that business is trying to actually achieve. So this lack of alignment can lead to a real lack of productivity, lots of friction in the business. This is expensive. Poor communication is costing you a lot of money. And this kind of stuff is really symptomatic of this lack of alignment, this lack of a shared understanding. And sometimes employees in organisations really have no idea about the big picture of that business. You'd be amazed at how many people don't have any idea about the vision or mission of their company. They don't know what the strategy is. They don't know where the company is going. And they really have no sense of how their day-to-day work is contributing to any sort of progress towards the strategy or anything bigger than their own team. And this is where internal communication can really play a massive role, because helping employees to get an understanding of the bigger picture, understand how they're contributing to something bigger than themselves, can really help to create a sense of purpose, a sense of motivation, and that greater sense of alignment where all the employees are really like rowing in the same direction to try and achieve these common goals together. And one of my favourite definitions of internal communication comes from a great book that Leslie Ullman wrote. It's called Better Internal Communication. I'm going to read you out her very short and direct definition of internal communication because I really like it. She says, internal communication is about ensuring that employees know what they need to do to deliver the company strategy. Now, I like this because she's getting at the heart of it here. Communication is about helping people know what to do so the business can achieve its goals. That's why internal communication is not a soft, fluffy, nice to have function. It is a business critical function because it directly impacts on whether a business can achieve its goals or not. And Bill Quirk talks about this topic as well as being really fundamental to an understanding of internal communication. He says that internal communication should help to translate the strategy of the business into the day-to-day actions of employees. And I just think he's nailed it there. That's exactly what it's about. So when we're thinking about definitions of internal communication, please go beyond the dissemination of messages, this concept of a postal service where we're just churning stuff out. It's actually really all about strategic alignment in the organization to drive progress towards business goals. That's what we do. Okay, that's internal communication. Then what the hell is employee engagement? Is that the same thing? Is that different? This is a really heated topic of conversation with my students when I teach this. Some of them say they are the same thing, they're just dressed up in different language. Some people say, no, they seem to be very different, but I can't quite figure out which bit is different and I can't quite articulate it in words. And this is really interesting because these are people that work in internal communications. We can't even agree amongst ourselves what it all means. And that is exacerbated in the literature because there are lots of different approaches to employee engagement. So let's have a look at a few of them and unpack them together. One of the earliest definitions of employee engagement goes right back to 1990. It was published in Work by Kahn. And his work set out to explore the idea that people invest different amounts of their physical, cognitive and emotional selves into their work, and that this really impacts the experience they have in their workplace and of the work itself. I'm going to read you out a quote from his work which sums up his approach to it. He concludes that there are, quote, 3 psychological conditions: meaningfulness, safety and availability. And for him, these are at the heart of employee engagement. And this idea of psychological conditions is quite common across lots of the literature on employee engagement. Now, the seminal piece of work in the employee engagement literature is, of course, the Engage for Success report, otherwise known as the McLeod report. This was published in 2009. The Engage for Success report was a study in the UK that looked at lots of different types of businesses, small, medium and large, and different industries, to try and tease out, is employee engagement really a thing? And if it is, what's driving it? And what should we be focused on to improve it? So the definition that they came up with in this report is still widely cited today. I'm going to read it to you because I think it's quite helpful. Employee engagement is a workplace approach designed to ensure that employees are committed to their organization's goals and values, motivated to contribute to organizational success, and are able at the same time to enhance their own sense of well-being. So there's quite a lot in that, isn't there? And this definition includes the idea that employee engagement is fundamentally about commitment on the part of the employee to the achievement of the organizational goals, commitment to the purpose of that organization. And it suggests that employment is more than just a transaction of labour for money, but actually that employees can be emotionally invested in the success of a company. And this harks back to what Kahn is talking about. He talks about psychological conditions. So this kind of commitment to a workplace would be manifested as being really loyal, maybe going the extra mile, going beyond your regular duties, maybe speaking to people outside of work about your workplace, taking a creative approach to solving problems because you really want to help the organisation succeed. And another interesting part of this definition by McLeod and Clark is about well-being. This idea that when employees are engaged, that their own sense of well-being increases at the same time. So it's not just that they are contributing more to the organisation, but they feel fulfilled and supported and looked after as a result. And there's another line I'm going to read you from that McLeod report. They say that employee engagement is ultimately about, quote, how we create the conditions in which employees offer more of their capability and potential. Now, Gallup also have their own definitions of employee engagement. For Gallup, it is about, quote, the involvement and enthusiasm of employees in their work and workplace. So as we dig into the definitions of employee engagement, I think it starts to become clear that internal communication and employee engagement are different beasts, aren't they? If we go back to Leslie Ullman's definition of internal communication, it's about helping employees know what they need to do in order to deliver the company's strategy. And then we think about the Engage for Success report definition of employee engagement, which is about psychological conditions. It's about motivation, it's about well-being, it's about commitment to the bigger picture. And in their words, it's a workplace approach. So employee engagement is much bigger than communication. So that leads us nicely into the third bit, which is where are the overlaps? Where are the boundaries between these two things? The author Jenny Field positions this really nicely. She says that employee engagement is an outcome of effective internal communication. And I like this because it positions internal communication and employee engagement almost in a hierarchy. So if you have employee engagement at the top, and then you have a number of drivers underneath that are feeding up, internal communication is one of those drivers that will help you to achieve employee engagement. But here's the bit. It's not the only thing that you need. There are lots of other things that you need. Your employees need to have that sense of well-being. They need to feel supported and looked after. Your leaders are going to have to be great leaders. Your managers are going to have to be really effective managers that are warm and approachable and can do feedback. And then there's also lots of hygiene factors, like your technology has has to be up to par. Your physical offices need to be good. Your flexibility policies need to be good. There are so many factors that will drive employee engagement in your organization. Internal communication is just one of them. And it's for this reason I sometimes feel uncomfortable when people have that job title of internal communication and employee engagement manager, because it suggests that if you have great communication, then everybody's going to be engaged. And it kind of neglects the fact that there are so many other things you need to get right to set the conditions for employee engagement. All right, the key bit I really want you to take away from this is that internal communication is an essential ingredient for employee engagement. There is a hierarchical relationship between the two, but they're not the same thing. And if you are an internal communication professional, you should not wholly take responsibility for employee engagement in your organization, because there are so many other factors at play that are totally outside your scope and remit and your control. So if you are a comms nerd like me, I hope you have found this interesting. I could talk about this all day. If there's anything that I didn't explain very well or anything that you want more detail on, drop a comment down below. I will read them all. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.